In the shadowed realm between life and death, where time folds upon itself and reality blurs with the unseen, a labyrinth awaits. An ancient maze woven from the threads of faith, doubt, and divine purpose. Here, the Apostle Paul embarks on a journey like no other, guided by the unyielding light of the Holy Spirit. Each twisting corridor hides a chamber of trial, a sacred space where the letters he once penned come alive, each epistle a challenge, a battleground where temptation, fear, and the echoes of a fading world rise to confront him. To fulfill his apostolic mission, Paul must confront the shadows within and without, unearthing strength from the depths of his soul. This is a tale of spiritual warfare and steadfast resolve, of faith forged in fire and hope shining through darkness. Step into the labyrinth. Walk with Paul through trials untold, where every step reveals a new truth and every victory draws him closer to the light of redemption. Welcome to the sacred labyrinth, Paul's trials. Chapter 1. The Threshold of Shadows. The air hung heavy with silence, broken only by the faint whisper of unseen winds weaving through stone corridors that stretched endlessly into the unknown. Paul stood at the labyrinth's threshold, the weight of his journey pressing down on his shoulders like the very world itself. Before him, the entrance yawned wide, a gateway forged not from earthly materials, but from the raw essence of faith and doubt intertwined. His heart pounded with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. The Spirit whispered softly within him, a flickering flame of light in the deepening gloom. Walk forward, Paul. The path is set by truth and trial alike. With a steady breath, he stepped beyond the threshold, and the world shifted. The solid ground beneath his feet dissolved into a misty expanse where memories and visions swirled like restless spirits. The walls of the labyrinth rose around him, adorned with glowing inscriptions, fragments of his letters, written long ago, shimmering with divine power. Each corridor seemed alive, pulsing with the energy of battles fought and words spoken in fervent prayer. Here, the very essence of his apostolic mission was etched into the stone, a reminder of the path he had walked and the path yet to come. But the labyrinth was no mere monument to his past. It was a crucible, a realm where the forces of the ancient world stirred, seeking to unravel the faith he had so fiercely guarded. Shadows lengthened and flickered, taking shapes that whispered doubts and temptations. The weight of unseen eyes pressed upon him, testing his resolve. Yet Paul's spirit burned bright. With each step deeper into the maze, he felt the guiding hand of the Spirit steadying him, lighting the way through darkness. He knew the trials ahead would be arduous, challenges not only of body and mind, but of soul. The first chamber awaited, a place where the echoes of his earliest letters would rise, demanding answers and courage. Here, in the heart of the sacred labyrinth, the apostles' true journey began. Chapter 2. The Letter to the Romans. Paul's footsteps echoed softly as he crossed into the chamber dedicated to the letter to the Romans. The walls themselves seemed to breathe, alive with swirling glyphs and radiant script that glowed like embers in a twilight sky. The letter, once penned in distant lands to a fledgling church, now pulsed with a living power, a sacred testament to grace, redemption, and the eternal battle between flesh and spirit. The chamber's air grew thick with tension, the glow casting flickering shadows that danced at the edges of vision. These shadows did not remain passive. They took shape, formless at first, then sharp and fierce. Lions, symbols of courage and trials, prowled along the edges, their eyes blazing with challenge. Serpents, silent and sinuous, slithered from the cracks, their voices hissing venomous doubts. "Are you worthy of grace?" the serpents whispered, their tones laced with ancient bitterness. "Can faith alone redeem your fractured soul? Paul, your flesh betrays you, your doubts consume you." Paul's breath caught, but his resolve did not waver. The words he had once written, the doctrines he had taught, now became his armor. He reached deep within himself, summoning the Spirit's unwavering light, the same flame that had ignited his soul on the road to Damascus. "It is not by my might or power," Paul declared, his voice steady and strong, "but by the Spirit of God that I live and conquer." The chamber responded, the lions retreating with a begrudging roar, the serpents dissolving into wisps of smoke. Yet the letter was not merely a shield, but a mirror. It reflected his own struggles, the tension between law and grace, the burden of guilt and the hope of salvation. The labyrinth tested not only his strength, but his faith in the very message he had carried across continents. The glowing script shifted, revealing a narrow path illuminated by flickering flames, a corridor winding deeper into the labyrinth's endless heart. Paul's footsteps quickened, each step filled with renewed purpose. The Spirit's voice echoed in his mind. "The trials ahead will be fiercer still, but you shall not falter." As he moved forward, Paul understood that the journey was far from over. The chamber of the Corinthians awaited, a place of fractured communities and harsh trials of unity and truth. But for now, he stood ready, the sacred flame burning ever brighter within him. Chapter 3. The Letter to the Corinthians. The narrow corridor led Paul into a vast chamber unlike any he had seen before. The air here was thick with the heavy weight of fractured hearts and discordant voices. Around him, the walls pulsed with glowing inscriptions, fragments from his letters to the Corinthians, a vivid tapestry of pleas, admonitions, and prayers he had sent to a church divided by pride, jealousy, and doubt. This chamber was a battlefield of spirit and soul, a place where invisible forces contended with raw human emotion. Shadows materialized, twisting into phantoms of anger, envy, and betrayal, swirling like a tempest across the room. Their whispers stung the air with venomous questions. "You preach love, Paul," they hissed, "but your words have divided us. Can fractured hearts ever find true unity? Is your faith enough to bind wounds so deep?" Paul's gaze remained steady, undeterred by their torment. He recalled the raw struggles of the Corinthian believers, their failures, their hopes, their desperate search for peace amid chaos. Taking a deep breath, he raised his voice, filled with the unyielding flame of the Spirit that had carried him through countless trials. "Love is patient and kind," Paul intoned, his voice echoing through the chamber like a clarion call. "It is not jealous, boastful, or proud. It does not dishonor others, is not self-seeking, not easily angered, and keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, trusts, hopes, and perseveres. Without love, faith is but a hollow sound, a clanging cymbal." The phantoms writhed and faltered as the words washed over them, their voices losing power before the radiant force of grace. The walls shimmered, the inscriptions blazing brighter, symbols of hope, forgiveness, and reconciliation glowing with newfound life. Yet the labyrinth's trials were unrelenting. As the chamber softened, the floor beneath Paul shifted and trembled, revealing countless doorways leading to halls filled with more trials. Temptations lurking in shadowed corners, doubts echoing from unseen depths, fears threatening to suffocate the Spirit. Paul steadied himself, feeling the Spirit's fire burn stronger than ever within him. He knew each challenge would test the very core of his mission, to spread truth, nurture faith, and build a community united by love and grace. With renewed purpose, he stepped toward the next doorway. The journey through the sacred labyrinth was far from over. Each chamber was a lesson, each trial a forge refining his spirit, shaping him into the apostle he was called to be. As he moved deeper into the maze, Paul's heart burned with a single conviction, that no darkness, no division, could extinguish the flame of divine love that guided his path. Chapter 4. The Letter to the Galatians. As Paul crossed the threshold into the chamber of Galatians, the air around him shimmered with restless energy, like a storm trapped in a crystal prison. The walls here seemed alive, swirling with waves of words, fiery and urgent, inscribed with passages about freedom, faith, and a struggle to break free from chains that bound the spirit. This was no ordinary room. It was a battlefield of ancient truths and present trials, where the invisible war between law and grace raged fiercest. Voices echoed all around, rising and falling like a tempest. "Are you truly free, Paul?" they challenged, their tones laced with doubt and accusation. "Can faith alone suffice? Or the law that has protected our people for generations? Can one cast aside the foundation of our heritage without consequence?" Before him, shadowy figures materialized, guardians robed in austere garments, their faces stern and unyielding. They clutched chains and scrolls tightly, symbols of law and tradition, their eyes cold with judgment. "You preach liberty, yet do you not risk chaos? Without the law, what order remains? How can spirit guide where rules fail?" Paul's heart burned with the fire of the Spirit as he stepped forward, his voice rising in passionate defiance. "It is for freedom that Christ has set us free," he declared, his words ringing like thunder through the chamber. "Stand firm, then, and do not submit again to a yoke of slavery. The law was our guardian until Christ came, but now, through faith, we are no longer bound. The Spirit leads beyond the letter, beyond chains forged by fear and custom." The chains shattered with a sound like thunder, clattering to the floor as if crushed by invisible hands. The austere figures wavered, their power dissolving like mist under the morning sun. The walls brightened, inscriptions shifting from harsh commands to vibrant promises of grace, hope, and transformation. Yet beneath the surface of this liberation lay deeper struggles. The chamber's wild energy pulsed still with temptation, whispers of doubt and fear that faith might falter under the weight of freedom. Paul felt the Spirit's flame within him, steady and unyielding, a beacon guiding him through the uncertainty. The labyrinth was relentless, opening new doors to trials yet unknown. Temptations lurked in shadowed corners. Memories of past fears tried to resurface, and unseen forces tested the resolve of his heart. But Paul's spirit stood strong, ignited by the sacred flame of faith that refused to be extinguished. With a determined step, he moved forward, leaving behind the echoes of law and chains, venturing deeper into the labyrinth where greater challenges awaited. His journey was a testament not only to the trials he had endured, but to the enduring power of grace to transform and liberate. Chapter 5. The Letter to the Ephesians. Paul stepped into the chamber of Ephesians, where the air shimmered with a holy radiance, casting golden light across vaulted ceilings etched with celestial mosaics. The scent of fragrant incense hung thick, mingling with the faint chorus of angelic voices that echoed, as if from a distant realm beyond mortal sight. This was a sacred sanctum, where divine mysteries unfolded, a place revealing the vast, intricate design of God's eternal plan for the church and the cosmos itself. Before Paul stretched a panorama of visions, vivid scenes of believers united as one body, joined in spirit across the boundaries of time and space. The church stood as a living temple, a fortress built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, with Christ himself as the cornerstone. Around him, spiritual armor gleamed, the belt of truth, the breastplate of righteousness, the shield of faith, the helmet of salvation, and the sword of the Spirit, ready for battle in this unseen war. Yet, shadows lurked along the edges of this radiant hall, creeping like smoke, the ever-present forces of doubt, fear, and division. They whispered in the silence, sowing seeds of discord among the faithful. "Who are you really, Paul?" they hissed. "Is your mission enough? Can the church withstand the forces that seek to tear it apart? Will faith endure beyond trials, betrayals, and despair?" Paul's voice rose, resolute and clear, fueled by the Spirit's fire burning deep within him. "I pray that you may have the power to comprehend, with all the saints, the breadth and length, height and depth of Christ's love that surpasses all knowledge, and be filled with the fullness of God." We are no longer strangers or outsiders, but fellow citizens with God's people, members of his household. The chamber pulsed brighter, the mosaics shifting from cold stone to vibrant life, revealing the mystery of unity and grace that binds the church. Paul felt the weight of his spiritual armor strengthen, each piece a symbol of divine protection and empowerment. But the labyrinth was relentless. As he ventured deeper, darker whispers tried to erode his courage, tempting him to surrender to despair or bitterness. The unseen enemy sought to fracture the sacred bond of love and faith that held the community together. Yet, the sacred flame within Paul flared fiercely, a beacon of hope and perseverance. The power of prayer, faith, and truth was his sword and shield. In the face of trials, he would stand firm, a warrior not just of flesh, but of spirit. With steady breath and unwavering heart, Paul moved forward through the labyrinth's winding passages. The path was perilous, the spiritual battles far from over, but his resolve blazed as bright as the divine light illuminating this holy chamber. Chapter 6. The Letter to the Philippians. Paul stepped into the chamber of Philippians, a place radiant with warmth and joy, unlike the shadowed halls he had previously encountered. Golden sunlight poured through stained glass windows depicting scenes of hope, perseverance, and brotherly love. The air hummed softly with songs of praise and encouragement, a stark contrast to the fierce battles of doubt and temptation he had faced before. Here, the spirit of joy was both a shield and a challenge. Around him, ethereal figures moved with grace and lightness, companions on a shared journey, their faces shining with faith and hope. But even in this sanctuary of joy, Paul sensed the subtle undercurrents of struggle beneath the surface. The voice of temptation did not vanish. It changed shape, whispering doubts about worthiness, reminding him of past sufferings and present chains. Can joy survive in the face of pain? A shadow murmured, weaving through the radiant figures. Is rejoicing possible when your own body is imprisoned? Can faith remain steadfast when hope seems fragile? Paul closed his eyes and breathed deeply, drawing strength from the Spirit's flame within. He spoke with conviction, his voice steady and filled with love. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. As he spoke, the shadows recoiled, unable to withstand the pure light of gratitude and peace. The figures around him radiated a serene strength born not from absence of struggle, but from the triumph of faith over adversity. Paul understood that joy was not the absence of hardship, but the presence of hope that sustained the spirit through every trial. The chamber seemed to expand, the warmth spreading like a gentle fire, filling every corner with a promise of peace that surpasses all understanding. Yet the labyrinth still tested him. Whispers of doubt sought to dim his light, to convince him that suffering was defeat. But Paul's heart burned brighter, fueled by an unshakable faith in the Lord's sustaining grace. With renewed hope and a joyful spirit, Paul moved forward, deeper into the labyrinth's winding corridors, ready to face whatever trials awaited, carrying the flame of joy as his steadfast companion. Chapter 7. The Letter to the Colossians. Paul stepped cautiously into the chamber of Colossians, where a profound stillness enveloped the air, as if time itself paused in reverence to the divine mystery held within. The walls were draped with enormous tapestries woven from celestial threads, depicting scenes of cosmic conflict. Radiant beings clashed with swirling shadows, and above it all, a towering figure radiated a light so pure it pierced the darkness. Christ, supreme and sovereign over all creation. This was no ordinary space. It was a realm where heavenly realities and earthly struggles intertwined, where the fate of souls hung in delicate balance. The weight of the revelation before Paul was immense. He beheld the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation, whose power and wisdom formed the very fabric of existence. Yet, the brightness of this truth was challenged by creeping shadows, subtle and insidious forces whispering deceit. False philosophies slithered like serpents through the air, empty traditions masquerading as wisdom, secret knowledge tempting the curious, hollow promises that promised freedom but delivered bondage. These forces sought to unravel the faith of the believers, to lure them away from the pure light of Christ's supremacy. A voice, soft but venomous, echoed in the chamber's vast expanse. Who truly holds dominion? Is not power found in knowledge, in mysteries hidden from the masses? Can one truly be complete without tapping into the secret wisdom that lies beyond? Paul's heart pounded with renewed fervor as the Spirit ignited a fierce fire within his soul. His voice rang out with authority, unwavering and clear, cutting through the whispers of deceit. He is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning and the firstborn from among the dead, that in everything he might have supremacy. For in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, making peace by the blood of his cross. The tapestries began to shimmer and move, transforming from static images into living visions. Paul saw the cosmic restoration unfolding, creation itself groaning, waiting for its liberation, and Christ as the unyielding force bringing healing and unity. The labyrinth around him seemed to pulse with this divine energy, illuminating the path forward, but also casting deeper shadows to be faced. Temptations rose like tidal waves, pride in knowledge, despair at the world's brokenness, the seductive call to abandon faith for the allure of hidden mysteries. Yet Paul stood firm, armored with truth and conviction. The flame of faith within him burned brighter than ever, a beacon against the encroaching darkness. He moved deeper into the labyrinth, each step a declaration of loyalty to the supreme Christ, each breath a prayer for strength. The battle was far from over, but the power of the risen Savior fueled his every move. The sacred flame of truth blazed, lighting the way through the labyrinth's twisting corridors toward the next trial. Chapter 8, The Letter to the Thessalonians. The walls of the next chamber pulsed like a heartbeat, warm with expectation and urgency. As Paul stepped inside, he was greeted by the sound of footsteps. Many footsteps, echoes of a faithful community marching through time, their hopes fixed on a distant horizon. The Thessalonian chamber shimmered with a silver glow, as though draped in the very light of dawn. Here, time was both fast and slow. Visions of suffering flashed quickly, believers under persecution, tears in the night, confusion about the end of days. But also, frozen in luminous stillness, were their acts of faith, carved into pillars of crystal. Hospitality, brotherly love, endurance. A city of souls caught between tribulation and triumph. Then came the voices, urgent, frantic, asking Paul with trembling lips, When, Paul? When will he return? What are the signs? What is to come? And with them, shadows crept in. A figure cloaked in deception moved behind the veil, whispering false prophecies, stirring fear, tempting despair. The man of lawlessness loomed in the distance, twisting truth into terror. Some believers began to waver, tempted to abandon their work, to wait idly, to lose heart. Paul's brow furrowed. The flame of his calling surged. He raised his voice like a trumpet. Do not be unsettled or alarmed. The day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night. But you are not of the darkness. You are children of the light, children of the day. Let's not sleep as others do, but keep awake and be sober. The chamber responded with a radiant pulse, and a wind of hope swept through. The Spirit whispered strength into Paul's soul as he walked among the golden inscriptions etched on the walls. Words he himself had written, now alive. Encourage one another. Build each other up. Pray without ceasing. Rejoice always. A trumpet blared far off in the distance, a sound not yet realized but promised, the return of the King. Paul's heart stirred with longing. His trials were not for nothing. His words had become armor for the weak, fire for the discouraged, clarity for the confused. But the trial was not over. A new temptation now tested him, the weariness of waiting. How long must one endure when the end is unseen? How does one remain faithful when the reward remains veiled? Paul pressed his hand to the inscriptions and whispered, "He who calls you is faithful. He will surely do it." The chamber brightened. The labyrinth opened a narrow passage, lit by a hopeful glow. With steady steps, Paul advanced, bearing the charge of watchfulness and hope. The night was still dark, but dawn was certain. And so he walked on, toward the letter that bore his deepest love, toward Corinth, toward the heart of the storm. Chapter 9. The Heartbeat of Thessalonica. The chamber unfolded before Paul like a bustling city alive with whispers, sweat, and the pulse of everyday courage. This was Thessalonica, not just a place of waiting for the end, but a crucible where faith was forged in fire and flesh. The air hummed with the sounds of the marketplace, haggling voices, the clatter of wheels, the murmur of prayers lifted amidst chaos. Here, the early believers carved out their lives, strangers in a pagan land, yet blazing with a light that refused to be snuffed. Paul saw them all: Jason, the steadfast host who risked everything to shelter the hunted; the widows and orphans, fragile yet unbroken, weaving threads of hope into the fabric of the community; the craftsmen and merchants, whispering the name of Christ beneath the roar of the crowds. Visions sprang from the stones beneath their feet, acts of kindness shared in secret rooms, meals broken with trembling hands, songs sung softly under the shadow of persecution. This was not a people waiting idly for salvation, but a family bound in struggle and grace. A golden scroll unfurled in the sky, letters shimmering like fire. Hold fast to what you have learned. Let love be your armor. Stand firm in the midst of storms. Yet even here, shadows lurked. The city breathed suspicion and hostility. False rumors like venom spread through alleys. Old gods whispered lies to weaken resolve. But the believers, with hearts ignited, answered with unyielding faith. Paul's voice rang out in the chamber, strong as the clang of a blacksmith's hammer. Remember, faith without works is a lamp without oil. Your love is your witness, your endurance, your sword. As the chamber pulsed with the rhythms of daily sacrifice and hope, the Spirit breathed over the scene, a wind that carried prayers, tears, and laughter woven into a tapestry of life. Thessalonica was not merely a waypoint on a journey toward the unknown. It was a beacon burning bright in the dark, a living testament to the power of faith made flesh. Paul's heart swelled with both sorrow and joy. The road ahead was steep and thorned with danger, but in this city of souls, the kingdom was already breaking through. With steady steps, he turned toward the next chamber, Philippi, the place of chains and song, where joy would dance with trials and hope would rise like a dawn never-ending. Chapter 10. The Joyful Chains of Philippi. The walls of a new chamber gleamed with golden chains that hung like garlands of honor, not burden. This was Philippi, a prison and a palace, a place where joy sang louder than sorrow, and chains became the strings of celestial harps. As Paul stepped inside, the room echoed with the clinking of shackles and the soft hum of worship. There was no darkness here, only twilight bathed in warm light. The stones of the chamber pulsed with memory, a dungeon, damp and cold, midnight hymns rising from bloodied lips, an earthquake that shook not the earth alone, but the heart of a jailer. Paul smiled at the vision, for this was the place where joy had triumphed over suffering, where salvation had found its way into iron cells. Images bloomed around him. Lydia by the riverside, clothed in purple and faith, opening her home and her heart to the gospel. The possessed girl, once tormented, now walking free under the gaze of the risen Lord. The jailer, once hardened, now weeping in gratitude as he washed the wounds he had inflicted. From the center of the room rose a great lyre, made not of wood, but of radiant iron. Upon it were etched the words of Paul's letter. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. The strings began to play of their own accord, and each note carried a memory, a beating, a hymn, a vision of Christ. The Spirit descended in the form of a dove made of fire and song. It hovered before Paul, glowing with joy that no sorrow could extinguish. But as always in the labyrinth, a shadow crept in. This time, it was subtle, not a beast or a storm, but a whisper. What joy can exist in chains? What freedom in submission? What light in loss? Paul turned, not with wrath, but with radiant peace. He spoke not to silence the shadow, but to sing above it. To live is Christ. To die is gain. His words became melody. The iron chains around the chamber shimmered, transforming into golden vines that climbed the walls and bloomed with flowers of praise. The air was sweet with gratitude, and the Spirit laughed like rushing water. Paul approached the altar of this chamber, where a crown made of thorns and laurel rested, woven with both suffering and glory. He touched it gently, whispering to the air, I have learned to be content in whatever circumstance. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. The altar opened, revealing a stairway carved into a mountainside. Each step was lined with mirrors showing the faces of those Paul had written to in Philippi, the poor, the persecuted, the partners in the gospel who had given not out of wealth, but out of love. As Paul climbed, his song lingered behind, echoing forever in the chamber like the heartbeat of the imprisoned yet free. At the summit, the Spirit whispered once more, the joy of the Lord is your strength. And the journey is not yet done. The labyrinth shifted. A new chamber appeared ahead. Colossae, city of mystery, where visible and invisible would intertwine, and the supremacy of Christ would blaze in unveiled splendor. Chapter 11. The Hidden Glory of Colossae. Paul entered a chamber veiled in starlight. It pulsed like a heartbeat, slow, steady, eternal. This was Colossae, the unseen city, the dwelling place of mysteries hidden since the foundation of the world. Here, time moved differently. The walls shimmered with constellations shaped like Hebrew letters, and a single phrase burned above the entrance, Christ in you, the hope of glory. As he stepped forward, the floor beneath him shifted like sand and crystal, revealing layers of creation stacked upon one another, visible and invisible, thrones and dominions, rulers and authorities, all orbiting around a single point of gravity, the Messiah. The Spirit of the Lord appeared not as a dove nor flame this time, but as a scroll sealed with 7 eyes, hovering before him. It unrolled itself midair, revealing an image of the preeminent Christ, the one through whom all things were made, who holds all things together, the head of the body, the church. Paul fell to his knees in reverence. This chamber was not a battlefield nor a prison. It was a throne room hidden within a cave. And the throne was empty, yet filled with presence. A whisper filled the chamber. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. Suddenly, the labyrinth tested him, not with monsters but with illusions. Idols of knowledge, traditions of men, shadows masquerading as substance. Philosophies danced like serpents before him, charming and subtle, offering wisdom without the cross. Paul stood firm, girded not with pride, but with revelation. All the fullness of deity dwells bodily in Christ, he declared, and his words became thunder. The false lights were extinguished in an instant. The room responded with a roar of approval, as if creation itself echoed the truth. Then, as if summoned by that very confession, a vision unfolded before Paul. A church he had never seen, faces he had never touched, saints he had never met, yet all united in the mystery revealed. Christ, not far above, but within them. Glory, not distant, but dwelling in dust. Golden chains descended from the ceiling, not to bind, but to anchor. Each bore the names of believers hidden in obscurity, unknown to the world, yet chosen and beloved. Paul reached out and touched one. It hummed with the memory of Epaphras, laboring in prayer. Another glowed with the name of one Zymus, once a slave, now a brother. Then came a final test. The chamber itself began to collapse inward, folding like a scroll. Would Paul cling to the grandeur of mystery, or walk forward into the mundane work of service and teaching? He did not hesitate. "Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly," he whispered, and the door ahead opened, not with fanfare, but with the quiet creak of obedience. The Spirit moved beside him like a silent wind. Ahead lay the narrow hall that led to Thessalonica, where time would speed up again, and the urgency of the Lord's return would blaze like a trumpet. But here, in the quiet starlit chamber, Paul had seen the cosmos inside the soul, the throne room within the heart. And he walked forward, not as a seeker of mystery, but as its messenger. Chapter 12. The Trial of the Spirit at Berea. The morning sun cast long shadows over Berea's hills as Paul and his companions stepped into the city's quiet embrace. Unlike Thessalonica's roaring crowds, Berea's streets whispered secrets of wisdom and inquiry, a sanctuary for the restless soul. Here, the people did not accept words blindly. Their hearts were sharpened swords, their minds fierce and probing. They tore through teachings like miners seeking precious gems, weighing every claim against the ancient scrolls. Paul saw their hunger, an unyielding thirst for truth that blazed brighter than any fire. The Bereans listened not just with ears, but with the fierce hunger of those who dare to challenge the darkness with light. In a hidden chamber, shadows danced as the elders debated fiercely, their voices low but charged with urgency. The scrolls lay open, their ancient letters burning like embers beneath their gaze. But the city was not without its storms. From the distant city of Thessalonica, whispers of jealousy and fury spilled forth. Opponents plotted, shadows creeping ever closer to silence the flame. Paul's heart, heavy yet unbowed, whispered a prayer into the wind. "Let truth be your shield and the Spirit your sword. Stand unshaken, even as the tempest roars." As night fell, the city held its breath. The believers gathered in secret, their voices rising in a chorus of defiance and hope, the words of the prophets alive upon their tongues. This was more than a trial of flesh. It was a battle for the very soul of faith itself. Berea's light shone fiercely, a beacon of wisdom and courage against the encroaching darkness. Paul knew the journey would be perilous, but in Berea's steadfast hearts, he saw the promise of dawn, the unbreakable power of faith, tempered by knowledge and fire. With dawn's first light, he prepared to move forward, carrying the torch of hope into the shadows yet to come. Chapter 13. The Descent of the King. The corridor narrowed, and Paul stepped into a vast chamber where mirrors floated in midair, each reflecting not the viewer, but scenes of a distant glory. Thrones of gold, stars bowing in reverence, angels singing before an eternal light. Yet at the heart of the room stood a basin of water and a blood-stained towel. This was not the majesty of Rome, nor the fire of Sinai. It was the humility of heaven. The Spirit, now clothed as a servant, knelt before the basin and gestured to Paul. "This is the heart of Philippi's message," he said softly. "The king who did not cling to his throne, but emptied himself." Paul looked into one of the mirrors. He saw a vision of the eternal Son, radiant and unapproachable, stepping down into time. Each step was a descent, into flesh, into poverty, into rejection, into the dust of men's roads and the pain of their betrayal. And still he knelt. The chamber shifted. Paul now stood in the upper room, beside a table of bread and wine. The king, wrapped in a towel, stooped to wash the feet of his followers, feet that would soon flee from him in fear. A voice echoed through the space, both thunder and whisper. "Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus." Suddenly, creatures of pride and ambition stormed the edges of the room. Tall beings clothed in crowns and mirrors, their hands dripping with gold. "Greatness is glory," they roared. "Power is dominance. Kneel to no one." But Paul remembered the basin. He reached for the towel. As he did, the illusions cracked. One by one, the mirrors of pride shattered. The Spirit spoke again. He made himself nothing. He took the form of a servant. He was obedient unto death. The floor of the chamber trembled. And now, above Paul, rose a great throne, not of gold, but of wood and nails. Upon it was engraved not a name of Caesar, but a name above every name. Light poured from it, a burning radiance that consumed the false crowns and turned ambition to ash. Paul fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face, not from sorrow but from awe. For in that moment he saw true greatness was not ascent but descent, not ruling over but serving under. The way up is down. The Spirit touched Paul's shoulder. Now you know why chains cannot defeat joy, why suffering cannot silence praise. For the King who stooped lower than all has been exalted higher than all. The chamber dissolved into light, and Paul walked onward, his heart clothed in humility, his spirit crowned with purpose. Ahead, the shadows of Thessalonica began to rise. But now he walked not as a man seeking to conquer, but as one called to pour himself out, as Christ had done. Chapter 14. The Flames of Thessalonica. Paul stepped once again into Thessalonica, but the city he entered was no longer just stone and mortar. It was a realm of restless spirits and unseen battles. The air vibrated with tension, a silent war raging beneath the streets, where shadows of doubt and fear intertwined with the fierce light of faith. Every alley whispered secrets, some of despair, others of courage. The marketplace, once vibrant with voices and commerce, now carried echoes of silent prayers and unseen tears. The city's heartbeat was fractured, like a war drum beaten unevenly by hands uncertain yet unyielding. Paul's footsteps echoed on the cobblestones as he moved deeper into the city, the Spirit's presence steady beside him like a shield. The walls around him shimmered, revealing scenes from the lives of Thessalonian believers, faces marked by suffering, yet glowing with hope. Jason, who risked everything to shelter the faithful, widows who wept for their lost, yet carried the flame of perseverance, craftsmen who whispered the name of Christ in the shadows, defying the roaring crowd. But with every light, the darkness pressed closer. Figures cloaked in deception slithered through the crowds, their words dripping venom, sowing seeds of confusion and despair. False prophets rose like specters, their voices promising false peace, twisting Paul's message into chains of fear. Paul's heart burned with urgency. He lifted his voice, his words ringing like a trumpet call across the city. Stand firm. Do not falter in the face of shadow. The kingdom of light cannot be shaken by deceit or despair. Your faith is a flame that no darkness can consume. Around him, the city seemed to respond. From broken altars, new fires ignited, fiery blossoms pushing through the cracks of stone. The faithful began to gather, their eyes bright with renewed resolve, their voices rising in a mighty chorus of praise and defiance. The battle was fierce. Winds of persecution howled like wild beasts. Storms of doubt crashed like thunder. Yet Paul stood unyielding, the letters he carried forming armor of flame and steel around him. Each verse a sword strike, each prayer a shield against the night. As dawn broke over Thessalonica, the city's scars gleamed in the golden light, not as wounds, but as marks of victory. The flame of faith, rekindled and blazing, illuminated the streets, a beacon for those still lost in the shadows. Paul breathed deeply, the Spirit's whisper filling his soul. You have kindled a fire that will not be quenched. Though trials await, this city's heart beats strong. With the city behind him shining like a burning star, Paul turned his steps toward the horizon, ready to face the next chamber of his journey. Chapter 15. The Legacy of Paul, a Flame Eternal. As the dust settled on the streets of Thessalonica, and the echoes of Paul's footsteps faded into the distance, a fire had been kindled, one that would never be extinguished. The apostles' journey was far from over. Though his physical presence moved onward, his spirit lingered like a blazing torch, lighting the path for countless souls yet to come. Paul's legacy was not merely etched in the parchment of his letters or in fleeting sermons preached amid the chaos of hostile cities. It was forged in the hearts of those who dared to embrace the radical message of grace, a faith that defied empires and challenged centuries-old beliefs. It lived in the trembling voices of believers who, despite threats and persecution, proclaimed a hope that would not be silenced. In Thessalonica, where once the temples reverberated with the chants of pagan gods, now rose the hymns of a new covenant. The flame Paul ignited grew into a roaring blaze, carried forth by courageous leaders and steadfast communities. His words, vibrant and alive, breathed strength into the weary and courage into the faint-hearted. But the true measure of Paul's legacy lay not only in Thessalonica's narrow streets or the echoing halls of the early church. His epistles traveled across vast seas and rugged mountains, carried by devoted messengers who risked all to spread the gospel's transforming power. Each letter was a spark, igniting faith in distant lands, binding together a tapestry of believers from diverse peoples and tongues. Centuries would pass, kingdoms would rise and fall, yet the fire of Paul's spirit remained untamed. His teachings, shaped by trials, imprisonments, and divine revelations, became the bedrock for countless generations. They taught that suffering, far from defeat, was a crucible of glory, that love was the mightiest weapon against darkness, that faith could hold firm even when shadows stretched long and thick. The legacy of Paul was a living flame, passed from hand to hand, heart to heart. It kindled courage in the oppressed, hope in the desolate, and conviction in the doubting. Wherever that flame burned, it illuminated the path forward, a path of sacrifice, redemption, and eternal promise. So, the legacy of Paul was not a relic confined to the past. It was a flame eternal, an unquenchable light that continues to blaze through time, guiding the faithful through every age, beckoning all to embrace the call of faith and transformation. And as long as that fire endures, the message of salvation and hope will never fade. As our journey through the life and legacy of Paul draws to a close, we stand humbled by the incredible impact one soul's faith can have across the ages. From the shadows of ancient cities to the hearts of believers today, the flame of hope, courage, and grace continues to burn brightly. Thank you for walking this path with us, for lending your ears and heart to these timeless stories. Your presence honors the enduring power of faith and the unbreakable bonds that unite us through history and spirit. May the fire kindled in these chapters inspire you to carry your own light forward, boldly, fiercely, and with unwavering hope. Until our next adventure, keep the flame alive. God bless and farewell.